I worked at a 24-hour CVS pharmacy in downtown Chicago, the kind of place that never really slept. We specialized in late-night prescriptions, insulin for diabetics, emergency antibiotics, those kinds of things. The overnight shift paid better, but it came with its own set of problems. I was 26 at the time, just trying to save up enough to move out of my tiny studio apartment. To be honest, the job wasn't that glamorous. Stocking shelves, ringing up customers, dealing with the occasional drunk who wandered in at 2 a.m. It was hard for a girl like me, but it paid the bills. Most nights were quiet. Just me with the hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional delivery driver stopping by for a Red Bull. But that all changed on a Tuesday night in October. Around 11:30 p.m., a customer walked in. He was a tall guy, maybe mid-30s, wearing a dark hoodie even though it wasn't that cold out. He had this weird energy, not aggressive, but like he was forcing himself to act normal. At first, I thought he was just another customer looking for cold medicine or condoms. But then the questions started. "Where's your allergy section?" he asked, even though the signs were right above the aisles. I pointed him in the right direction, but he didn't move, just stood there, staring at me like he was waiting for something. Then, "You work alone?" My stomach tightened. I forced a smile. "Nope, my manager's in the back." A lie. He nodded slowly and told me, "Good, it's not easy for someone like you to work alone." That was weird. He didn't have to judge me all of a sudden, but he kept looking at me, like he didn't believe that I wasn't alone. Then he asked, "What time do you get off?" I was shocked. What does he have to do with me? I replied, 1 a.m., another lie. Midnight was my actual shift end. He lingered for another few minutes, pretending to browse, before finally leaving without buying anything. I locked the doors the moment he left. The nearby store was undergoing renovations, so the back exit was blocked off by equipment. That meant I had to leave through the front, where the parking lot stretched out under bright streetlights. When my shift ended, I was halfway to my car, but then I heard footsteps. Fast, heavy. I turned just in time to see him sprinting toward me from the shadows near the dumpsters. "Hey, need a ride?" he called out, way too loud for the empty lot. My keys were already in my hand, the sharpest one wedged between my fingers like my dad taught me. I shook my head and kept walking, faster now. Then he did something that made my blood freeze. He yanked open his coat. There was a gun tucked into his waistband. It looked fake, cheap plastic, like a toy. But in that moment, I wasn't taking chances. I opened my mouth to scream, but before I could, a voice cut through the dark. "Everything okay over here?" One of the construction workers, a guy named Javier, walked toward us, a crowbar slung over his shoulder. Javier asked me if everything was okay. He froze. Then, without a word, he turned and vanished into the night. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. 3 days later, around 2 a.m., the power went out. Not just in the store, the whole block. The backup generator must have failed, because even the emergency lights didn't kick on. 1 second, I was restocking the aspirin, and the next, I was standing in complete darkness. Then I heard it, a thud from the back of the store. My breath hitched. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. Silence. I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped it. The flashlight barely cut through the blackness, casting long shadows down the aisles. That's when I saw him, standing at the far end of the pharmacy counter, a scarf pulled up over his nose, his eyes glinting in the dim light. I didn't think, I just ran. He lunged at me, but I grabbed the taser I kept in my back pocket, the one I'd bought after the parking lot incident. I swung wildly, missing him by inches. His boot slammed into my stomach, knocking the air out of me. I crumpled to the ground, gasping. Then I heard sirens, and so did he. I was trying to catch my breath, while he bolted for the exit. The cops found the back door pried open. They never caught him, but I know it was the same guy. I quit the pharmacy a week later. Sometimes, when I'm walking to my car at night, I still glance over my shoulder just to make sure no one's following me. And whenever the lights flicker, I grab my keys, my taser, and get ready to run. My wife Claire and I bought our little cabin in the woods 3 years ago, just a few miles from Lake Nipissing. It was an old A-frame with those big picture windows that made you feel like you were living inside a postcard. We fell in love the moment we saw it, despite all the work it needed. The leaky roof, the drafty windows, the kitchen that still smelled faintly of the previous owner's pipe tobacco. We met back in college at the University of Toronto, both environmental science majors. I'll never forget how we literally crashed into each other. She spilled an entire coffee on my field notes during a forestry lab. The cabin was our escape from the city, our weekend sanctuary where the loudest noise was usually the loons calling across the water. It wasn't fancy by any means. The kitchen cabinets held a mismatched collection of dishes left behind by the old owners, floral patterned plates next to chipped camping mugs. The wood stove would smoke you out if you didn't open the flue just right, and our backup generator sounded like a chainsaw in a tin can when it ran. But it worked when we needed it. At least it always had before that night. We were finishing dinner when it started. Claire had made venison stew using the recipe her grandfather taught her, simmering it for hours on our camping stove. The rich smell filled the cabin, mixing with the scent of pine from the Christmas tree we'd cut down ourselves. Outside, snow fell so heavily I could barely see the tree line through the windows. At exactly 9:37 p.m., the lights flickered twice before dying completely. I reached for the heavy-duty flashlight we kept by the door, counting the seconds as I waited for the generator to kick in. 40 seconds passed, then 60. Nothing but silence, and the growing cold. Claire lit the emergency candles, their flickering light making the shadows of our mounted fishing rods dance across the walls. That's when we heard the first sound. 3 slow, deliberate scratches along the western wall, not the random noise of branches. This was different, measured, intentional, like someone dragging metal claws across the siding. I'll never forget how Claire froze, her spoon suspended halfway to her mouth, a chunk of carrot falling back into her bowl with a quiet splash. Her eyes locked on mine, wide and unblinking in the candlelight. "Bear?" she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. Moving to the window, I wiped away the condensation with my sleeve. The yard lay in complete darkness. No security lights, no glow from neighboring cabins, just the pale moonlight reflecting off fresh snow. No tracks, no disturbed drifts, nothing to explain the sound. Then it came again, this time from the deck, right outside the sliding glass door. 3 slow scratches. A pause. 3 more. Claire's fingers dug into my forearm hard enough to leave bruises that lasted a week. We stood frozen, barely breathing, as the silence between each set of scratches stretched impossibly long. My pulse pounded so loudly I was certain whatever was outside could hear it. Just when I thought I might scream from the tension, the generator roared to life. The floodlights blazed on, illuminating every inch of our property in harsh white light. Nothing. No tracks in the snow, no disturbed branches. Just our lonely snowshoe trails being slowly buried under fresh snowfall. At 3:16 a.m., the power failed again. This time, the generator stayed silent. The temperature plummeted so fast I watched my breath form thick clouds in the air as I scrambled for my winter overalls. That's when the banging started. Not random pounding, a pattern coming from beneath the bedroom floorboards. I dropped to my knees, pressing my ear to the freezing wood. The banging moved slightly left, following me. Claire's face went sheet white. "We don't have a basement," she whispered, her voice cracking. She was right. Our cabin sat on a concrete slab. There should have been nothing but frozen earth beneath us. We fled to the truck, the engine roaring to life as we blasted the heat. For 5 agonizing hours, we watched the dark cabin through snow-streaked windows, seeing nothing but jumping at every shadow. At first light, armed with a shovel and hunting knife, we investigated. The western wall bore 3 parallel grooves, each exactly 4 feet long, spaced 6 inches apart, cut deep into the wood as if made by something with immense strength. The snow revealed a single set of footprints approaching from the woods. size 14 at least, with an unnaturally long stride. They stopped abruptly halfway back, the final imprint perfectly preserved as if the maker had vanished mid-step. Inside the utility closet, the generator's fuel valve had been deliberately turned to off. Behind it, charcoal symbols covered the wall in strange angular patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from the corner of your eye. Then the radio screamed to life. Static blared at full volume from our battery-powered emergency unit. When I ripped open the battery compartment, my hands shook. The cells were corroded husks, dead for months. We packed in terrified silence, leaving behind clothes, food, even Claire's grandmother's cast iron skillet. The real horror came later when we called Marjorie, the realtor who sold us the cabin. She initially played dumb. "Oh, the scratching? Probably just ice expanding," she said with a forced laugh. "And that generator, those old models are so unreliable." But when I mentioned the symbols on the wall, her breathing changed. "What symbols?" I described them, the jagged charcoal marks that seemed to move in the corner of your vision. Another pause, then her voice dropped to a whisper. "Look, the previous owners mentioned something like that. They painted over them. Twice." My stomach turned. "You knew?" "I thought they were exaggerating," she snapped, then sighed. "The file said stigmatized property, but that could mean anything. A death, a crime. I figured it was just small-town gossip." Then came the worst part. The original owners, in the 80s, their dog disappeared from a locked basement. That's why they filled it in. County records confirmed it. Our cabin was built in 1987 over a filled-in basement from an older house, one that had burned down under suspicious circumstances. Firefighters noted the flames had burned downward in places, as if something had pulled them into the foundation. We drove past the cabin last month. The new owners, a young couple from Toronto, were outside installing security cameras at every angle. When we stopped to ask why, the husband laughed it off. "Bears, you know how it is." But his smile didn't reach his eyes, and the cameras weren't pointed at the woods. They were aimed at the house itself. Later, at the diner in town, the waitress slid our coffees across the counter. "Those city folks?" She nodded toward the cabin's direction. "They've called the sheriff 4 times this month. Say their motion sensors keep triggering inside when nobody's home." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Funny thing, the cameras never show a damn thing. The current owners swear nothing's wrong. But last winter, they poured a new foundation, 6 feet thicker than code requires. And when we drove past last month, every west-facing window was boarded up from the inside." I woke up shivering at 3 a.m., my teeth chattering so hard I thought they might break. The air in my bedroom was so cold, I could see my breath hanging in front of me like little clouds. I reached for my phone. The screen lit up with that awful 12% battery remaining warning. This was the 4th night this month the power had gone out. My phone showed alerts from ERCOT, explaining they were doing rolling blackouts across Texas. That's when they turn off power in different areas, to keep the whole system from collapsing. My neighbor Dave had texted me an hour earlier. "Pipes froze. No heat since midnight. You okay over there?" I dragged myself out of bed, my bare feet instantly going numb on the icy floor. I pulled on my thickest winter coat right over my pajamas and went to look out the front window. The whole neighborhood was completely black, no streetlights, no glow from house windows, nothing except for the dim glow of the moon. It was the kind of dark that feels heavy, like you could reach out and touch it. As I was walking, I suddenly saw the movement across the street. At first, I thought it was old Mr. Peterson from 2 houses down, checking his generator again. But when the figure straightened up, my stomach did this weird flip-flop. This man was enormous. I'm not talking tall basketball player big. I mean, he looked like he could palm a refrigerator. His shoulders were so wide, they stretched the fabric of his puffy black winter coat. He moved toward the Ramirez's front door with this creepy confidence, like he knew exactly where he was going. It made my blood run cold. The Ramirez family was on vacation in Florida. Everyone on the block knew this because Mr. Ramirez had asked Dave to collect their mail. Their fancy security system sign hung by the door, completely useless without power. I should have called the police right then, but instead, like an idiot, I grabbed my flashlight and quietly slipped outside. The cold hit me like walking into a freezer, that sharp, painful kind of cold where you can actually feel the little hairs inside your nose freezing. I crept across the street, staying low behind the parked cars. My flashlight flickered, damn the cold, casting jagged shadows that made the trees look like skeletal hands reaching down. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the occasional groan of frozen branches. Then I heard it, a wet, ragged breathing, not mine. The giant man was standing motionless on the Ramirez's porch, his face turned toward my house. Moonlight caught the curve of his cheek, revealing skin that looked wrong. Not pale, not sickly, just unnatural, like wax stretched too tight over bone. His lips were parted slightly, and I swear I saw his breath curl out in a slow, deliberate stream, as if he were savoring the cold. I ducked behind a minivan, my pulse hammering in my throat. The snow beneath me crunched too loud, and I froze. The breathing stopped. A long, tense silence. Then crunch, a footstep, just on the other side of the van. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying he hadn't heard me. But then the van shifted, tilting slightly as something heavy leaned against it. A gloved hand, black and slick, like oil, slid over the hood, fingers splayed wide enough to leave dents in the frost. The metal groaned under his weight. And then he sniffed, a deep, wet inhale, like an animal catching a scent. He knew I was there. The streetlight across the way buzzed to life in a sudden burst of flickering orange. I flinched, blinking against the harsh glow, and the man was gone. No footprints, no sound of retreating footsteps. Just gone. I didn't move for what felt like hours, my body locked in terror. When I finally forced myself to look, the Ramirez's front door was slightly ajar, a thin sliver of darkness yawning open like a mouth. I ran. When the power finally came back around sunrise, the police found the Ramirez's back door had been forced open, but nothing was stolen. Not their TV, not Mrs. Ramirez's jewelry, nothing. Their security system was down during the blackout, so no cameras caught anything. I didn't sleep right for a week after that. Jumped at every little noise. My neighbor Dave thought I was being paranoid. Until he checked his own security cameras. Just static during the exact time of the blackout. But the worst part? The next morning, I found my own back door unlocked. Not forced, just unlatched. And on my kitchen counter, half melted into the wood, was a single, massive handprint in frost. But here's what still gives me nightmares. When the Ramirez family came back from Florida, they discovered someone had unplugged their basement freezer. Hundreds of dollars worth of meat and frozen food had gone bad. Nobody knew the reason for this, but whoever it was, he knew I saw him. And now, every time the power goes out, I hear the same wet, ragged breathing outside my window.